Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Well, today is International Women's Day, and I got introduced to a really unbelievably fascinating lady who has changed her life and changed her passion and changed what she's all about. And she's got a really fascinating TED Talk that she describes this sort of transformation of her life called Dare to Care, and how she assists people, females worldwide, that need help in getting their businesses launched and up to a bigger scale. I want to introduce you to Jennifer Lonergan, who is a PhD. She's executive director of an organization called Artistry Sud, and she runs this charity which is helping women around the world and assisting them in running their businesses. And that's a fascinating story, and she's got some interesting things to say about that. But in addition, she's got a really interesting story about what got her to launch that business. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Brian.
So let's start out by talking a little bit about, is it called Artistry Sud?
That's right, Artistry Sud.
Tell us a little about Artistry Sud, if you could.
Sure. Thank you for asking. So we work with women in the Global South, which is where the Sud comes from. And as you may know, kind of the equality, women's access to opportunities is greatly circumscribed in the South, Global South. And we work with them to help them identify and build their revenue streams. So using their existing assets, the things that they already know how to do and are already doing, and how to figure out how to have, kind of sort of sustainable revenue streams from those assets that they are, whatever that may be. Like in many cases, for example, women around the world are making textiles, or could be other things that are very, useful and essential for the family, but they also sell them for additional revenue streams. So the idea is to determine how they can leverage those for income. And the reason we do that is because when women begin to generate income, that's really the sort of the door opening to respect and influence in their household and communities. So if we want more women, participating in decision making and having their value sort of heard and respected at the household and then community levels and beyond, then we really need to have women in positions where they're able to sort of be financially autonomous. So that's what we do.
In your TEDx talk, you spoke about one female and her family in Africa. I can't remember which country, and it was a really compelling story. And there were a couple of things that came out of that story to me. One was how many children she had to take care of. Number two, how the husband, the father, was absent and came back every once in a while. And the only thing he came back with, it seemed, was HIV. And third, that she sent her eldest daughter away to a boarding school so that she could get educated, because if she stayed with the family, she would just be doing menial errands rather than getting educated. It was really quite the heartbreaking story, but also heartwarming that you were able to assist her.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, I think we don't really realize all the things that are involved. So I don't know if you're aware, but there's a lot of research suggesting that, I'm going to say Global South, obviously there's a lot of differences between different places, but in the Global South generally, there's lots of, research that suggests that when women are in charge of resources, they really spend them on things like education and nutrition. And one of the things we don't realize is that education is a really big piece. And it's not only a big piece because it's like, well, in lots of places, school is free, for example, but it may be the kids have to walk 45 minutes to school, or they may not have electricity at home. So they have to buy, shoes so they can walk to school, or candles so they can, study by candlelight at night, because by the time they finish all their chores, there's really no time left to prepare for school, So there's really a lot of, there's a lot of challenges that sort of don't, kind of fly under our radar,
What did you do with this lady? Well, how'd you help her?
Well, we helped her name was Florence, and we helped her and other women to be able to generate a sustainable revenue. So Florence, like many women, they were making kind of textiles, which was part of the local tradition, and decorating them, and then trying to look for where to sell them. I mean, very often they sell them at local markets and things like that. So it's really about kind of finding small ways where women can have an impact on how much revenue they're generating. So in that case, Well, and in basically all cases, because we kind of have a standardized approach to this that we tweak depending on the circumstances. But basically, we go into an area, we ask them, we gather a large groups of women together, and we ask them, what are some of the opportunities that they could imagine? So we try to train them to see opportunities, to figure out how the market works, to understand how to communicate with their target market. And so what we have is, situations like in that case, for example, where they make some discoveries like, oh, this is the kind of thing that's likely to sell more, or this is the kind of, oh, I can see now how to figure out what the market is more likely to buy, so they're able to maybe tweak the things that they're already doing so that they can just have more sales. And because it's a context where, honestly, it doesn't take much to make a big difference, but we have women within a year kind of doubling their incomes and tripling their income. So that just makes a big difference. It means they can, lots of things that before were a real stress for how to pay for now are just possible.
I wrote a paper once on microfinance. I think it was called the Gramercy Bank, and how just a little bit of money could really help people. And this was not just females; it was everybody. But would really help people get a leg up. Sounds like you're taking that one step farther, and actually giving them some management skills and some marketing skills and some production skills, and helping them get going.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the thing is that they don't have opportunities for learning, and I think that, microfinances can be a really important tool, but often women don't really know what to do with that. So they may have access to loans. I'm not saying they do everywhere. Obviously, that's, there's a barrier to the access to that type of thing as well. But then when they get the money, they don't know what to do with it anyway. So, there's that whole piece about like, well, what, and I think the way the sector approaches that problem is a lot, it's very charitable. So we run a charity, but we run it, really thinking about, with kind of rational, practical principles. Once you're in the, let's say you have a bit of money, or you whether you do or you don't, you have some assets. So how can you use them, and how can you identify what's needed in the market? And a lot of it is just kind of analytical skills, communication, analytical skills, just identifying opportunities. So it's entrepreneurship sort of writ large, but really an entrepreneurship mindset as well as like the kinds of skills that you need.
But it sounds to me like what you're doing in addition to entrepreneurship and teaching entrepreneurship and helping these women get started, almost more importantly, is you're empowering women, and you are changing the lives of these females, and hopefully by them, their communities and maybe even their countries.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there is lots of research that suggests that women, once women are in a position that they're actually, so there's a couple ways in which women have impact. They have impact on their immediate families. Once they have resources, they're creating financial resources. So they prioritize nutrition and education and things like that. And then all those things like have kind of a knock-on effect, right? Because it's sort of, it's not a stretch to say that they impact their countries too, because as women keep girls in school, there's also all this research. If girls are in school a little bit longer, well, they tend to delay their marriages a little bit longer, which means they delay their families a little bit longer. And again, we're talking about, we could be talking about from 15 to 18. So then the context is very different. But if the longer you delay that, there's all kinds of evidence. The longer, the less likely you are to have infant mortality, the less likely you are to have problems with a mother dying in childbirth, or all those kinds of issues, so there's long-term health benefits. There's long-term, benefits to the GDP, even when girls are in school longer, contribute longer, more to the formal economy, and so on. So there's lots of benefits, no matter how you slice it. And as you say, a big piece, and I think this is really a central part of the problem. And it took us some time, because initially when we started doing this, it seemed like it was about skills. And now it's really clear it's about confidence. It's because women often are, they come from situations where they're not really valued. They're seen as an expense. They're kind of an expensive thing that you should get married off quickly, so they become somebody else's expense. And once women sort of get present to the fact that they're actually able to contribute, and I don't only mean on a financial level, but just that they have a voice and that they have some things to contribute, it's really life-changing for them, and we have many women who graduate from our programs who say, oh, look, I used to try to express my opinion, but nobody listened to me. And now I feel much more confident, and I can talk to anybody in my village and say what I think. And, I attend the village meetings and I contribute. So it really is a game changer. And a lot of it, as I say, is because women are excluded so much from the educational process, and, there are just not that many opportunities open to them, and they're not seen as, it's not seen as important to educate them. they end up in this situation where they kind of think that they don't have any value. So when they start to feel really confident, it's a big change for them. So
that's interesting that you're out teaching entrepreneurship, but really what you're doing is teaching confidence. That's fascinating. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with Jennifer and hear a little bit more about Artisan Soude and how she got into it and what it actually has accomplished. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Today is International Women's Day, and I've got a very interesting guest. Jennifer Lonergan is her name. She is the PhD founder of Artistry Soude. She's worked with artisans and artisan groups in a dozen developing world nations in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. As a buyer of fair trade and ethical wholesale and retail markets in North America in particular, for the boutique that she owns called Artistry, and in partnership with international development organizations in the US and Canada, she has helped support artisans' effort to generate revenue by capitalizing on their strengths to meet the needs of a fast-paced marketplace. Jennifer has a PhD in women's history and 20 years experience in education and curriculum development, both critical tools in her efforts to build capacity among artisans to meet market needs while supporting cultural heritage preservation. Fantastic. And you've got an incredible TED Talk or TEDx talk that I listened to called Dare to Care, which I recommend to people because it really is very inspirational. But I got to ask you, Jennifer, right in the middle of this TEDx talk, you talked about your own challenges and what motivated you to change your career and your career trajectory and your mission in life. Can you tell us a little bit about that if you're comfortable?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, there was just a time in my life where, it was kind of an intersection of a few things, but one of the things was, I had a good job. As you mentioned, I'm a historian, and I was working, I worked at Canada's biggest history museum, and I worked at National Historic Sites. I had a great job. I was doing things, there were efforts to find the women in our built heritage for National Historic Sites. So I was part of that, which I felt was valuable. And I had a great job, and I, after also many years in education, and then I was in this kind of sort of public education field, and I felt like it was really important, except I kind of hit the wall on something, and it actually took me kind of an embarrassingly long time to figure out what was wrong, because I guess I had just been so schooled to think well, this is a great job. I have a great situation. I have lots of friends. I have my own house. I can, and something was really missing, and it feels like a cliche because I hear a lot of people say it now, but I mean, it's like something was missing. And at the same time, I had been on sort of a life-changing trip to India, maybe 15 years before that, or 10 or something. And I had been on a life-changing trip with a friend of mine that I'd grown up with and her father. So it was really, and he was he was born and raised in India, and so it was really a kind of behind the scenes look at what was happening in that, in I don't want to kind of generalize, but I mean, in that part of the world. And I realized that I just came face to face with my privilege, and for absolutely no reason. I had opportunities growing up that no reason for those opportunities, just happened to be born, what Warren Buffett calls the ovarian lottery. I just happened to be born in the right place at the right time to have many more opportunities than all these women who were, serving us dinner at the dinner table. We were like the honorary men because we were foreigners and guests. So we would sit at the dinner table, and the poor women would go eat the leftovers sitting on the kitchen floor, So it was kind of a shock. That's just one example, but it was really a shock to me. And over time, I think these two things sort of collided. And the one thing was this, I sort of achieved something in my career that left me feeling a little like, is this it? And then at the same time, I'd had this other really profound experience which really came face to face. And again, I'm not, it's not that we can be kind of knowledgeable in an intellectual way, but when you sort of see things with your own eyes, it just really brought me face to face with the just injustice in the world, and the fact that I wasn't, doing a lot about it. So eventually those two things collided, and I struggled with it. I mean, I was drinking a lot. I was crying all the time. I couldn't sleep. I mean, this was like a long period
Oh,
of
really?
like a real kind of breakdown. Yeah.
How long did this go on?
Maybe 2 years. It was a year, I think, of crisis. And then I started to realize what the crisis was about. And I really felt like the crisis was about the fact that I wasn't doing things that I thought was meaningful, that I really felt were contributing to improving the world. Um, and I mean, again, I don't want to overstate the case, but I mean, I think everybody it's incumbent on everyone to make the difference that they can in wherever they think is important. Um, and I just got present to that. And so I started to sort of, I was in therapy for a long time, and I did, and then I started to sort of look at, okay, well, where is the opportunity for action? Like, where do I believe that I have some expertise that can be useful or helpful? What's my own inspiration and interest, and I sort of pieced that together, and I eventually started a store. So the initial incarnation of Artistry Sud was this store in Montreal, and where I was buying things handmade by women in the global South in different countries. And I was kind of going and visiting them and understanding their dynamic, and maybe spending, 3 or 4 weeks in a location and trying to understand what the situation was. And then, kind of coaching or helping, because I had direct access to a market, because I was bringing this stuff home and selling it in a store. Where I was obviously talking face to face with people who were buying things. So I had much more direct access to a market. So, and then we did some wholesaling and things like that. But what I realized was that women were not, the sale is really critically important. And when you're in sales, you care about the sale. So you're very motivated about the sale, but the learning that goes into it is like there's less opportunity for reflection. So I think just the kind of educator in me ended up winning out. And I founded Artistry Sud because I felt like there was this whole piece that's missing, that they don't know, when they get a sale, an international sale, which is not everybody's goal, but with the women I was working with at the time, that was like one of the things they wanted. They were looking for exports. And when they get a sale, they're delighted, but they don't know how they got it. They feel like it's just, kind of a miracle. They can't reproduce it, So it was really about then the next step, the next phase, and the phase that we're in now is really about training women to identify what the patterns are, how do you benefit from the market, how to understand what's happening.
So let's come back to that in a minute, but I want to come back to this process, because I think this process is something that a lot of people go through, males and females, not just females, of trying to figure out sort of what their purpose is in life. And it sounds like you went through, a 2-year process of real introspection. You described it as depression, in fact, in your TEDx talk. And that somehow you made your way through it and found your passion and found your raison d'etre in life. Tell me how you did that. Was that a light bulb in some therapeutic session, or was that it was that remembering back your eat, love, pray trip through India, or what was it?
It was a lot of things, and it wasn't like I woke up one day and it was, I knew. No, it was really a process of, one of the things, and I think I mentioned this in the TED Talk too, it was really like trying to remember when I had been lit up, when I had been happy, what was it? And so I look back, and I found the answer in some very surprising places. I think, I can't remember if I mentioned this, sorry, but I had been an English teacher, like an EFL teacher, back in the olden days, like when you finished school, when you finished your job and you finished your education, and you didn't get, you didn't have a tenure track position on my plate. So I became an English teacher in Greece. And I had such a beautiful
teacher in Greece. Sounds almost like Mamma Mia or something.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I had fallen in love with Greek and moved to Greece after my PhD because I didn't have a tenure track position. And I was like, okay, well, let me figure this out. So I'll spend a year doing this. And I really, that year was so impactful for me. But I really didn't recognize it. 15 years later, I had kind of dismissed that as a job. You know what I mean? I didn't take it at all seriously, because it was really my like figuring out what I'm going to do next year. But I had such like meaningful exchanges that were not at all about teaching English. But I realized, like, in the context, because I was able to remember like these moments where I really felt like I was able to create a space to facilitate other people's sort of flourishing, other people's aha moments, other people. So I realized that since I was able to do that, and that's what really gave, made me feel like alive, that's what I needed to create more in my life. So I was kind of trying to figure out, well, what can I bring? And again, there was this whole experience where I'd been in the developing world, and I was like, oh, we need to do something. There's this crazy, unfair, this situation where people have just a lack of opportunities. We need to where women have a lack of opportunities. And I think it's a real detriment to the world that women do not participate more fully. And I just think it's, kind of unfair. So I looked for how I piece it together. And I mean, to come back in the sort of practical steps, I was reading through a book called Jumping Ship at the time, which I've looked at in the meantime, because I've tried to recommend it to people. It's hopelessly out of date. Like the internet was a new thing then, but it had some interesting things. And one of the things that I took away, a real key takeaway, is because, I think people, when they're on this path, and now I talk to a lot of people who are like, how do you change your life? How do you find your purpose? A lot of people feel like, oh, I have to get it exactly right. I don't think you have to get it exactly right. One of the things that was in this book was, explore 3 options. Like if you can kind of identify 3 areas that you feel compelled to pursue, that you're interested in, and you feel like you have something to bring to the table, because that was the intersection that I was looking for. It was something that I felt lit me up, something that I felt was important, something that I felt I had something to bring. I have some expertise or some, unique experience that I can bring to this, whatever it is, this new initiative. So I developed a few ideas, and I ended up running with one, but I didn't try to develop the one perfect idea. I was looking at 3 different ideas, and then one of them sort of took off. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And I love the sort of what lit you up. What you remember in your past when you were the happiest and most excited about getting up in the morning, and what lit you up. I like that. That's fantastic. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with Jennifer in just 2 minutes and talk a little bit more about women today on International Women's Day. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Jennifer Lonergan. She's got really a compelling story about Artistry Sud and how she went through a whole process to try to figure out what her meaning in life was, and that she wanted to help underprivileged females in the developing world and teach them entrepreneurship and get them to scale and get them to market, et cetera. And it's interesting. And it has been interesting, and she's got a fantastic TEDx talk that I recommend called Dare to Care that I've listened to, and it's really quite inspiring. But Jennifer, I wonder if we could elevate just for a second. Today is International Women's Day, and I guess people think that women still are not equal and need International Women's Day to bring awareness to the issue. What do you think? Is International Women's Day still something that's needed? Are women unequal in our world today? And do men need to be educated? Do you females need to be inspired? Tell me a little bit about what you think about International Women's Day, if you could.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what you think the objective of International Women's Day is. I mean, I kind of think it's about raising awareness about the situation that women do experience all over the world. And I mean, if that's the case, if we agree that it's an awareness raising opportunity and not much else, I think it is much needed, because I don't think, I certainly don't think there's anything like, equality, or, there's many places in the world where, there's a lot of work to be done around women's rights, and even in our own, sort of context in the sort of global North, in the industrialized West. If you look at that, there's a kind of a report that came out recently, the McKinsey-Lehman report about women, the Great Breakup, like women leaving. Women are not increasing, in their kind of in big corporate North America. That women are not increasing their roles. They're at risk of sort of decreasing their rise to the C-suite.
Yeah,
so
women's labor participation rate is going down, which is shocking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it kind of depends on, I personally really think the world would be a better place if women were more, were much fuller participants in it, and I think it's a kind of damning statement, honestly, about what the state of politics in corporate North America look like, that women are leaving rather than, increasing in numbers, they're actually leaving. So what's the problem there? I mean, there's something wrong there, I think. And I think that, we absolutely, we need women, like, I just think there's an influence there that needs to be brought, and all around the world, women are bringing their, women are champions of biodiversity. Women are, for all kinds of reasons, we need to have, I think we need to really level up women's participation in our societies, in our businesses, in our everywhere. So Paul, I mean, just look at Paul. I mean, it's just everywhere. Politics. Look at that. We're still. I mean, we're kind of stuck. We haven't moved that much.
You're a PhD in women's studies.
Yeah.
And you say you're a historian. You really don't think we've moved that much?
I think. Well, I mean, if you look in our context right now, like in the last 10 years, we haven't moved a lot. Of course, if you want to look back to 150 years ago, sure, we've moved a lot. Definitely. But what's our goal? I mean, don't you think our goal is, I don't know, some sort of equality, equity? Don't you think we want women in all spaces where decisions are made?
Yes.
Yeah, in that case, then we still got some work we need to do,
We still got some work to do.
I think so.
And you're doing the work in number one in the Southern Hemisphere in assisting female entrepreneurs. But I think you're also doing the work in Montreal and Canada by inspiring people with your story, with your TEDx talk, with hopefully this interview tonight. Really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If people want to check you out or donate to your charity or something like that, how do they best do that?
Well, they can find us if they can spell it, at artistrysud.org. Or, if they Google Artistry Sud or look up artistrysud.org, they can make a donation right on our website.
It's a real pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much. You've been the perfect guest for International Women's Day.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.